Welcome to Corporate Therapy, the podcast where we unpack the dumb shit businesses do. We ask the big, juicy questions like why, what were they thinking, and then chase down the answers. Today, we're going to dive into the middle management and why your change ambitions are riding on them. I'm Matt Anderson, a business designer, which is a fancy way of saying I'm a corporate plumber fixing the crap businesses do.
And I'm Rob. I'm Irish, so there's no reason to adjust your sound settings. I'm a bit of a fossil in the people and culture world. Been working with people for a very long time, so I'm looking forward to getting into this topic with you, Matt.
Awesome. Now, this is our first time doing this, so I'm sure this is going to be as clunky as hell, but we've got a bunch of questions we've tried to write down for all of you so we can sound like we know what we're talking about. But the first thing is, why did we want to focus on middle management, Rob? What do you think? What appeals to you about talking about middle management and change today?
I really think middle management and middle management, particularly in relation to change, are either where your success or your failure lies. You know, I've worked in organizations that have set middle management free, if you like, let them off the chain to do the kind of things that only they can do, and they've become marvelously successful businesses for it because of it, or they've navigated very complex changes because of it, and it's worked really well. But I've also seen businesses where people keep a choke chain on middle management, perhaps feel threatened by them because they are good, and perhaps they threaten those above them, where they're treated like mushrooms, kept in the dark, fed on shit, and expected to know everything at the same time, you know. And those organizations, from what I can see, either tend to lose their success if they've had it previously, or to really struggle navigating changes to a point that most of their middle management gets made redundant in the next big org restructure. So I really think they can be the difference between success or failure in a change, even success or failure in a business.
Yeah, it's for me, the reason I was excited to focus on middle management is I got pissed off between the strategy's perfect, it's an execution problem, and it's just those folks in the middle that are stuffing it up. And it's like, well, hold on, what's going on in middle management layer? And I remember working with a client, chatting to some of the frontline, and they says, "Oh, those bloody marshmallows, right in the middle, that are just stopping us from understanding what the hell we're meant to be doing, because they're like this awkward translation layer, right, between the bullshit that comes from on top and what needs to happen on the shop floor."
Sure.
And to me, it's like, that's a pretty harsh take that's kind of happening on middle management. So I got to spend more time kind of hanging out with them, and you get to watch the caught between a strategy pretty much built in an ivory tower, which they weren't actually part of being, or a change that's coming their way that they had no say in the decisions. If anything, it's ambushed on them, and they may or may not be given talking points. And then they don't even know if they've got a role or a certainty, and yet they're meant to somehow guide their teams through this change. It just felt like you're setting people up right from the beginning. I'm like, there's got to be a better way to do this.
Yeah, sure. Well, we're agreed on that, certainly.
Oh, well, that doesn't happen often. We normally don't agree on stuff, Rob, that's going through. So we'll need to dial up the tension as we go through this. So I'm curious, though, from your point of view, what are you seeing as some of the challenges middle management have butted their heads against?
So I think, you mentioned one there that's really important. This idea that, the senior leaders in an organization come up with some sort of an ivory tower strategy that the middle managers have had no input into whatsoever, but they're expected to execute it. And I think, I'm trying to remember who it was, somebody, it'll come to me later. He who has a why can put up with just about any how, was the quote. I think it was Viktor Frankl. But I think that's the issue that most middle managers in that scenario have, is that they don't understand the impact it's going to have on themselves, that they don't really understand the impact it's going to have on the business, yet they're being expected to lead their people through it. I almost always assume the best of intentions in people. So I think most middle managers are really proud of the fact that they look after their teams.
Yeah.
Sometimes they see that as shielding them from the bullshit that flows down from on high. But sometimes they put themselves on the line for it. And what they do is, despite the fact that they don't really know where they're going, they try leading the charge anyway, and that it ends up in chaos. It's well-intentioned chaos, but it's chaos nonetheless. And I don't blame the middle managers for it. It's often the senior managers that aren't communicating the direction the organization's taking, the transformation they're going through, whatever it is, that leads to that confusion to begin with. I think middle managers are often doing the best they can with what they have.
Do you feel, speaking of expectations, like what is it that you think senior management are expecting their middle managers to do during change?
Yeah. So, well, that kind of depends on the kind of senior manager we're talking about. I worked for an organization once where I think middle management were treated really, really well, were seen as the value that they were for the organization. And the thing that I noticed about the senior managers in that organization was that the CEO would regularly remind them that their job was to get the roadblocks out of the way of these middle managers so that the middle managers could run the business. Their job was to set a strategy, get rid of roadblocks, and set them free. And I was a middle manager in that organization myself, and it was empowering. It was a fun place to work. You felt
Mm,
like you were valued. You felt like you were let off the chain, and when you got stuff done, you felt proud of it. Constant. I mean, on the converse side of that, I've worked in organizations where you're just seen as another little cog in a giant bureaucratic machine. Um, and your job is to pass down exactly what we've told you to pass down, and nothing more and nothing less.
yeah.
Despite the fact that it's bullshit, you're still doing your very best to try to sort of uh, comfort even and shield the people in the business and the parts of the business that you've got responsibility for when you're all at sea yourself.
So in terms of, have you yourself been in a situation where it's been given to you like a shit sandwich and it's like, I just want you to
Oh,
roll that
absolutely.
out,
Yeah, yeah.
without naming any of the organizations that might have been there, Rob?
So
Because
we're going to change the names to protect the guilty.
that's what. um, can you share like a change that you asked to be part of and run us through that?
Yeah, yeah. So there was a change I was involved in quite some time ago now. And I will not mention names to protect the guilty. But one of the issues that we had at the time was I really wanted to communicate with the teams that I had responsibility for.
Mm,
And there was a transformation person who was responsible for leading this change who kept saying to me, "We're not going to communicate until we have 100% of the information."
yeah.
And I was like, well, we're never going to have 100% of the information. 70% would be pretty bloody good. I'd settle for 50, I would have even settled for, we're not sure yet, but I want to communicate this to you anyway. Here's a couple of possibilities or probabilities, or even just, we don't know, but we'll find out and we're working
Yeah.
on it. But we were basically told zero communication until we've got 100% of the info, and we never were. So when we realized that eventually, or when the folks that were responsible for the transformation realized that eventually, and we went and had the all hands meeting.
Yeah.
um one of the real cultural ambassadors of that organization stood up and spoke directly to the CEO and said, I feel like I've been married to this organization for the last however long he'd been working there, and I've just found out it's been cheating on me for the last 6 months. And that really hit me hard, because I felt like that about that organization as well. I felt like I'd been married to it for a while. It was a fun place to work.
Yeah.
um but but what got me about it was the fact that he said it feels like the organization's been cheating on me for the last 6 months. There was genuine emotion there. There was genuine betrayal.
Mm,
And it destroyed the positive impact that organization had had up to that point. So to me, that was a big deal. There's emotion there. There's betrayal there
yeah.
when you're kept in the dark. And often that's the role that middle managers are asked to take, whether or not they want to. So they either will, or they'll go behind the back of the people that have asked them to do that and tell people the truth anyway, which just causes chaos in the organization also.
What about the flip side of that, where, okay, they've decided that bugger the senior management, they're going to be all on the people side, on the employee side or their team side that's going through? What's the dangers in just saying, I'm going to only take that side of the equation? Have you seen that play out?
I have. I think the issue, there is a Goldilocks zone here, right? There is a place where the porridge is neither too hot nor too cold. Yeah. Um, I think if you lean into people completely,
Yeah.
you're seen as and as middle managers or senior managers, you're seen as wishy-washy. You're seen as, okay, I get that you care about me, but what's the strategy? What's the plan? Where are we going here? So to me, that perfect middle ground is to acknowledge the fact that there's emotion happening,
Yeah.
but also show you the plan that's going to get you out of it.
Yeah.
I've got another T-shirt that just says, "Hope is not a good plan." And I really like that. Sure, it's nice to be hopeful, but there has to be a plan to get me there. So I think that's the danger with the pendulum swinging too far the other way, is that we
Yeah.
get very into people's heads. We get very into, is everything okay with you? I just want to check on your mental well-being and all of that sort of stuff. And whereas that's wonderful stuff to do, my experience with it is people have a backlash to it when it comes across too hard, where they're like, yeah, my mental health's fine, but what I need you to do is your job. you know
Yeah.
I've had a scenario like that once, where I had actually exited an organization because of a really nasty senior manager. And when I went to another person's leaving do, because they had also exited because of this same manager, I had the CEO come over to me and go, "Hey, I haven't seen you for a while. Are you okay?" And this is your friend talking, not the CEO. And my response was, I don't I don't need a friend here. I need a CEO. I need somebody who's going to hold that person accountable for the bully that they are. And he's going to realize that now I've walked out of your organization. This person's walked out of your organization. What was once one of the highest performing teams in the organization is slowly but surely being dismantled. And you're
Mm.
worried about how I'm feeling about it rather than doing anything about it. I was like, I've got the feelings covered. I've got other friends. I need you to be the leader.
Yep.
So to me, that's a big deal. You know.
Do you, yeah, because I've sat on the C-suite side of things where it's
Mm,
just been, and I've watched my colleagues, my peers at this point in time say, we do need information to be perfect. We're not quite sure. And there's pretty much a selfish also attitude around, we're not going to tell them anything so that we stay in control of holding on to the talent, right? For as long as possible until we've made up a decision who we need and what we kind of need at that point in time. Completely oblivious to the fact that the water cooler conversations were already happening, the whispering had already started at that point in time, and the mutiny was already in play, right?
sure.
And so I think I'm stunned in this day and age how we still try and black box the communications and not loop in our middle managers
Mm,
into helping us to be able to solve for it, because it assumes that the C-suite or the execs actually know what's happening on the shop floor. And I think this brings us to the kind of next topic, which is what superpowers do the middle managers have, right? That allows us to make change really fire, really ignite.
yeah.
What superpowers do you think only middle management have that the execs perhaps don't have, or the frontline don't have in this space?
There's two things that middle managers have that the execs often don't.
Yeah.
As an exec, if you're walking around as a C-suite member of an organization and you're chatting to folks on the front line, even if you're the nicest CEO or CFO or whatever in the world, they're going to tell you precisely what you want to hear, and that's it. Because that's it's entirely natural and fair enough too. Um, 99 times out of 100, they're going to tell you precisely what you want to hear. It's very rare that you'll get somebody brave enough to tell you what they actually think of your
Yeah.
organization. But they will tell the middle managers. And to me, that's the first superpower that a middle manager has, is that they've got the direct line to the grapevine. They
Yeah.
they know about the rumor mill. They know who's been kissing who on Friday night after the drinks, and they know what's going on in the holes of power, where the real decisions are made. They're just directly plugged into the grapevine, and that's a big deal, because that's often hidden from the execs, and there's an opportunity in an exec team that are prepared to set their middle managers free and allow them to utilize their potential. that there's an upward communication that allows the senior managers to find out about what's going on in the grapevine as well. The second thing that I think is really important is they know who the cultural ambassadors in an organization are. They know who the people are that really, really get the values of the organization, whether those are spoken or unspoken. That don't just do stuff right, but behave in the right way, do the right thing. Not that I'm saying there's just one way to do it, but you get what I mean. They're values aligned, yeah.
Yeah.
Um, and to me, if you want to change an organization, you need two things. You need top-down support. So you need the C-suite on board, yeah.
Yep.
But you also need those cultural ambassadors, and it doesn't matter what level of an organization they're at. They can all be frontline folks, or they can be dotted throughout your hierarchy. But those are the people that maybe not get change done, but accelerate the acceptance of it.
Yep.
And if you can allow middle managers to use their knowledge of the grapevine to understand what the rumor mill is talking
Yep.
about, and then use those cultural ambassadors to spread the word wide,
Yeah.
that's how you get a change done in half the time, you know.
Because I think you've touched on a couple of really awesome superpowers there. One is like those black book of favors that they actually have, the grapevine that you've got of their network in that space. I think the second one is they also become that pace setter that you've just talked about, the
Sure.
ability. And this pace setting is one I think that we need to be really careful with, because when your middle management saying we're burning our people, or this change is just going a step too far, it's not that they're resisting the change. They're just trying to say, I want the change to work. I'm worried it's going to stuff up at this point in time because we're loading up our people. What are we going to take off the pace,
Sure.
take off the plate for them to be able to solve it? I think that pace setting where they're saying, how do I still get BAU ticking over? How do I therefore welcome the change? Because it's two layers of the cake now that we're loading up on the teams to kind of play with.
Sure.
What signals do you look for there in the pace setting? And of course, just as we got interesting topic, my dog wants to go out. One moment. We're back.
Yeah, the pace setting thing's an interesting one, and I'm not sure I've got an answer on this, Matt. I've seen really good middle managers both speed up change pace and slow down change pace. Yeah.
Yep.
So I get where you're coming from with the pace setting thing. To me, there's often a vibe of let's just get it done as quick as possible so we can get back to BAU, whatever the hell BAU means these days,
Yep.
Um, so what they want to do is feed up to the senior managers their knowledge of what's going on in the grapevine, their knowledge of who the cultural ambassadors are that can speed this up. But I've also seen them go, hold up, I'm about to burn out everybody on my team here,
Yeah.
including myself. Although they'll never say that out loud. It's always, or at least that's what I've seen. I'm always wary of saying never, because I'm sure it's happened somewhere. But I haven't seen it yet. They worry about their people first and themselves last, which often leads them to being burnt out more than their team. But that's when they do it. Like I remember a boss of mine saying to me, hey, don't worry, it's all going to calm down in 3 weeks. And my
Yeah.
response was, you've been saying that for nearly 3 years now, right?
Yeah.
And she just went, wow, I have, but but so to me, that was my first little white flag of, okay, I'm burnt out now.
Yeah.
I need you to slow things down, which is why we were having that conversation in the first place. But sorry, to get back to your point, I've seen them speed it up and I've seen them slow it down, but they speed it up with the grapevine and with the cultural ambassadors. They slow it down because they're concerned about the burnout of their people. How they do that, I'm not entirely sure. I think it might be a sort of case by case kind of thing, depending on the change that they're going through at the time. I haven't quite got my head around that yet.
Yeah. Well, I think one of our dear friends, Nigel, may have
Oh, yeah.
given us a clue that's in that space where he said, if you're getting either you're cheating, right, and you're working endless hours past the 5 o'clock end date, right, to get it all done, or you're completely incompetent because you didn't do it during the work day. And
Yeah.
I think it's the first item. They are cheating, right? They're working all hours to get it done. It's why you're seeing everyone from Ghana, Future Forums, Capterra, all talking about burnout records for middle managers being at the severe end of the scale. They are uniquely in a position where they are the flagship for you're exhausted. When you dive into looking at that, we're seeing that middle managers was talking about, I'm being spread too thin.
Yeah.
And even McKinsey says, well, they're being spread too thin. Over half their time has actually been spent on bureaucratic crap that's going in
Mm.
the space. So they're not only having to deal with the strategy, they're not only having to deal with the change and the BAU, you're also asking them to be these technical miracle workers and fit in the admin in between it, because they're trying to navigate how to make things happen. And
Yeah.
most organizations are shockingly bad at making things effortless or easy for the staff to actually get things done.
Sure. Sure. What was it Bilbo Baggins said? Like butter spread over too much bread. That's-
In terms of other superpowers, one you touched on a little bit earlier was they know their teams and they know their people. Like
oh God, yes. Yeah. Yeah.
yeah, like what superpower in that one, that intimacy, that understanding, that therapist style role, like tell me a bit more about that.
I can really only tell you this from my perspective, Matt. I think, I would be concerned about trying to get inside somebody else's head to that extent. I've been running my own little business for a while now, and the only thing that I really miss about my corporate life was
Yeah.
leading teams. It was the greatest fun that I had. Um, I was really lucky in that I had some great bosses who taught me some wonderful skills in relation to leading people and helping them to unlock a little bit of their potential. Um, but I also inherited a couple of teams, including a couple of dysfunctional teams, but they
Yeah.
weren't dysfunctional for very long, And the reason I think for that is I have a genuine curiosity about people.
Yeah.
I like to know why they make the decisions they make. I like to know what makes them tick. I like to know what motivates them, what they hate. I love to know what they love, what they hate, everything in between. I like getting my head around how they
Yeah.
tick. And because of that, uh, I ask them a lot of questions. I try to get my head around what motivates them. And I mean, you mentioned Nigel earlier. I remember him coming into a class that I was training at one point. I think he was the chief operating officer in the organization at the time, and he came in to see this new class that had come into the organization, and he said, "Hi, I'm Nigel, and I'm a guitarist." And everybody was like, "What? I thought you were the chief operating officer." He was like, "Nah, I just do that so I can buy more guitars." But whereas he was joking, to me that was kind of important. There was an understanding of his motivations that came from it. There was one scenario. I said I was lucky to have a couple of great bosses. There was one conversation I was having with a boss of mine where I mentioned in passing that I had been playing with a band. I'd been singing, and I thought my voice had got about as good as it was going to get without some professional singing lessons. Um, at the end of that financial year, I got my performance review. I got a big pay rise because I'd just got a change of role from the CEO. And what I got from my boss at the time was a little letter to say, "Thanks for your contribution throughout the year. And here's a voucher for $500 worth of singing lessons." And I was like, wow, I could have bought that voucher many times over with the pay rise that I've just got. But, I've forgotten the pay rise now. I'll never forget those vouchers because that was somebody who took enough of an interest in me to work out what motivated me, what really lit my fire outside of
Wow.
work,
Wow.
and found a way to weave it into our working lives. Now, I say found a way to weave it into our working lives. That makes it sound like she was being really manipulative, but she wasn't. She had a genuine interest in me being a happier person, right? So that was the thing that I learned, is that everybody has something that motivates them. And
Mm.
if you can get your head around that and find some way of at least just showing an interest in it, even if there's no way that you can weave it into work, that makes a hell of a difference. Realize that every single one of your colleagues is a human being, is a person, is somebody who has a life outside of work, and the coolest thoughts going on in their head if you just care enough to ask a question and dig a little deeper. So my take on it has always been just to have that painful curiosity in people. If you want to create a a an excellent team, a team that's motivated, a team that gets stuff done, a
Yep. Yep.
team that's prepared to follow you through hell if that's what it takes.
Yep. Yep.
They've got to know that you have an interest in them for who they are,
I think when change hits, though, as well, you end up being incredibly scared or afraid. Can be
Oh,
like, do I have a future? Will be able to pay the bills? All those sort of things kick in. And unless you have a degree of trust or a relationship with your team at that point in time, they're like, you're part of management. You're at
yes.
the point where you're going to set us up. So I think they do need to absolutely understand, but they also going to be that degree of trust that they're not going to set us up to fail. They're going to be straight with us. But that does rely then on the middle management having a clue as to what the hell's going down, and
Yes.
the ability to translate some of the information that's coming through as, okay, well, what's this going to mean for us? And so I think that brings to the next superpower for me, which would be around the ability to translate bullshit. I don't know
Sure.
who's writing comms for corporates internally, but like they sound like a defensive legal justification that means F all to the staff at that point
Mm.
in time.
Yeah.
What have you seen middle managers do well, or the superpower around translating what's coming down during change? What roles are they playing there?
I think I saw Frances Frey talk about. Check out a couple of her TED talks. She's fantastic. But one
Yep.
of the things that she spoke about was that good communication is it's based on a tripod, three legs: authenticity, empathy, and logic. Yeah.
Yep.
And tripods are unstable enough as it is, but if one of those is missing, that thing comes crashing down pretty quickly. Yeah.
Yep.
So she jokes in her TED talk saying, well, if your logic's broken, I can't fix that for you. You're going to have to work on that yourself.
Yep.
Um, but she talks a little bit about how you can be more authentic, how you can show more empathy, etc. But to me, that really hit home, because I think that's what a good middle manager does in a change communication scenario, where they're trying to translate the bullshit that's come down from on high for their team, who
Yep.
are petrified that they might not have a job in a week's time.
Yeah.
And if the logic is there, that's okay. That's communicable. That if there is some logic in the message that's been passed down from the senior managers, they'll
Yep.
find it, and they'll find a way to talk it through with their teams in such a way that it makes sense to them. But if the logic isn't there, if
Yeah.
it's what you and I have seen in some organizations, where it's risk management, it's ass covering, it's all of the fear motivators, yeah, and that's why no sort of cohesive message is getting down through the organization.
Yeah.
Middle managers can make up for that for a while with authenticity and empathy, right?
Mm.
If I go, I know you're scared, I'm scared too, right? I wish I had the answers for you. I wish I could make this make logical sense, but I can't at the moment. However, you know me, I'm going to do everything that I can to make sure that I get you the information that you need, and that I stop this shit rolling downhill. Your team have to be able to trust you to take a bullet for them,
Yeah.
And the only way they do that is if you're authentic with them. If you tell them, yeah, hey, I'm scared too. And if you empathize, and I know you're scared, so I'm going to do what I can to logic the hell out of this for you. But it's, might take me some time. Or I might never get there, but I'm going to do my best.
But this is all about the middle management being on the receiving end, right?
Yes.
The bleeding obvious is, why don't we bring them into the hut or into the loop that's going earlier on in the piece for senior managers, saying, hey, help me figure out the approach to change. Help me figure out how do we make the most of this. Help me navigate how we get the change through. What stops senior leadership from involving middle management in change up front?
Do you want me to get cynical here?
That's very unlike you, Rob. So.
I've noticed a trend, mate, and I'm sure you've noticed it too. HR teams in particular, people and culture teams, whatever we're calling them this week, um, are more and more merged with legal teams,
Mm,
finance teams. So you've got a CFO who's taking care of HR. You've got a head of legal who's looking after people as well. Yeah. And don't get me wrong, I don't mean in any way to disparage finance folks or legal folks here, but those are primarily risk focused roles. Yeah. A good legal team saves you from legal risk. A good finance team saves you from financial risk. You've got to take risk in transformation. You have to. And you particularly have to take a risk with people. I think what's happening is that you're getting traditionally risk averse teams into a situation where they need to take a little risk on people, and they don't. They default back to, we don't have all the information, so tell them nothing, you know. Or if we tell them this and it leaks to the media, we're all screwed.
yeah.
Or if we tell them this and there's a revolution, we're going to be the first against the wall. There's this fear, this risk aversion,
Mm.
this ass covering stuff. When instead what you need to do is trust these folks. You know, they want to be here too.
So it's a very insightful around the risk approach that's going there, but they also have ideas. So it's not just about, I'm going to help you to communicate the change. It's like, help me to actually solve the bloody problem that sparked the change or the need for change is going in the first place.
Yeah.
What stops us turning to middle management for ideas?
Well, I mean, the organizations that I've seen that have been successful with change do that.
Mm,
You know,
mm,
the organizations that I've seen value middle management rather than turn them into scapegoats at every possible opportunity do that too. You know, they talk about bottom up approaches and don't just talk about them, do them too. You know, um, I've worked in organizations where it was middle management and below that set the objectives for the entire organization and rolled it up to the senior leaders. But I think, you know, that it kind of goes back to what I said earlier. We absolutely should involve them in
mm.
these kinds of conversations because they know the grapevine. They know the people that can make this work or the people who will make it fail. You know, they know how to um, sequester and manage the little terrorists that you have in your organization that'll burn this to the ground,
Yeah.
at the same time pushing the cheerleaders to the front of the stage. You know, they get the people, they get the business, they get the politics, they get the motivators in the organization, and we should absolutely be using them for every change that comes our way.
So they got superpowers. We've
Hmm.
got examples they work. So why
Yeah.
are they becoming an endangered species? Like, why are we saying, okay, we need to make cuts here, and the first cab off the rank is going to be middle management. We need to flatten the structure. We need to reduce the amount of middle managers that we've actually got. Why is that if they're actually critical to your change, firing and igniting?
Yeah, again, you know, I could fall into a little cynical hole here that you might have to drag me out of. Um, but you know, I think not that long ago, most of the big management consultants were
Yeah.
saying, you know, flatter is better and matrix structures and hierarchies are dead. And despite the fact that we know now from a few experiments that that's not the case, that
Yeah.
middle management are actually really important in an organization, we still have that hangover. Oh, well, the structure should be flatter, so it's time to do a change, time to do some organizational restructuring. Well, let's get rid of that layer, you know, the most important one. And I think it's just a hangover of old school thinking, you know. um that hierarchy's important in that case, or at least that's my take on it.
Yeah, because it's been the early 1990s where let's flatten structures. That's how lean organizations, and we've just held on to that. But I do believe we're starting to see a glimmer of hope that we got to get our middle management layer key to our strategy. But especially in technology firms, if I'm reading any newspapers, like this is the crowd that we're going to say goodbye to. So enough of the doom and gloom. Let's take a look at the solution side of things, though. Like,
Yeah.
what are you seeing the things that their organizations can do to actually prime and set up the middle management to actually be those ambassadors, those champions, those kick-ass people we know they can be when change comes about? What are some of the
Yeah.
ingredients you look for?
So there's a couple of things that I've seen here that I think are really good. There was one organization that I've done quite a bit of work with, and one of the things that they run on a pretty regular basis, a
Mm,
couple of times a year, is what they refer to as their emerging leader program. Yeah.
yeah,
I think one of the reasons that middle management has the reputation it does in some organizations is because we're never shown how to lead. We're never taught to lead.
yeah.
They assume that because we were brilliant at whatever technical thing we did before, we'll be brilliant at leading a bunch of people who do that technical thing as well. And those are such completely different skill sets. So one of the things I loved about this organization is before you ever become a leader, once they identify you as having the potential,
Yeah.
they send you on a training program, and that training program teaches you how to set objectives, how to deliver feedback, how to deliver coaching, how to manage poor performance, how to motivate people. It's soft skills based, and those soft skills make a bit of a difference. Yeah. Um. So I think that's a big deal. I think.
If I can
Certainly.
pause you there, though, would
Yeah.
it surprise you, Rob, to know that HRD Connect last year came out with a study that basically said, though, 63% of leaders do not get any training when they start. Furthermore, it gets better. 74% never saw any follow-up or ongoing training. As in,
It wouldn't surprise me at all, and that is one of the key problems that we have in businesses at the moment. If you think about the great leaders you've had in your career, and think about the shitty leaders you've had in your career as well, and think about the impact they've had on your life, right?
mm,
I don't know about you, but there are still bad managers I've had that to this day, 20, 25 years later, are still on my list of enemies, and I hope I never run into them again. Yeah. That
mm,
said, there are also a couple of bosses I've had that 20, 25 years later, I would still follow into hell.
mm,
Whether they needed me to or not, I'd be right there. Yeah. We know from our own experience that leaders, particularly at this middle management level, have a monstrous impact on your life, and we throw them in at the deep end and expect them to swim, and that's it. This one of the reasons I loved this particular approach was because it was so unusual. You do get some organizations that react to that. Oh, you're a leader now, great, we better give you some leadership training. But for these guys to be proactive about it and go, we've identified you as somebody who has the potential to be a
mm.
leader in the future, so we want to set you up for success. I was like, this is what everybody should be doing. It didn't take a massive amount of investment,
Yeah.
but it set people up for huge amounts of success. And the organization was comfortable in the fact that these are people who are hitting the ground running. The other thing that I would do, aside from setting people up for success with training, is I would coach the hell out of them. You and I have had coaching conversations where both of us have been the coach from time to time, and I love those conversations, and I love having a coaching conversation with somebody that I'm doing some coaching with. Because to me, that's the best opportunity that you have to drag something new out of that person's head and go, see, there it is. There's the superpower you've been looking for. If you want people to unleash their potential, they should be having regular coaching engagements as well.
But if you've got learning, you've got training, you've got investing in the people, but they're
Yeah,
madly busy. When are you going to squeeze this in? And so I think one of the important things that organizations need to consider is what the hell do you want the middle management role to be about?
yeah,
Actually have to simplify it right down because this is a people leadership role. This is the
absolutely.
majority of the reason it's there. So what are you doing to actually free the decks of the bureaucracy, of the admin, and actually make it possible to make change, have a shot because you're focusing on talent? What's your
Yeah.
take on that, Rob?
I don't know precisely when it was, Matt, that busy became glorified. Um,
Mhm,
I think it was, late 90s maybe, that if you weren't busy, there was something wrong,
mhm.
became the default approach. So, you know the way you ask somebody on a Monday morning, how was your weekend? And they go, good, before they've even thought about the question you've asked. They might have had the worst weekend of their life, but they'll respond with good because that's what you expect.
Yeah.
Try asking somebody how work's going at the moment. And I guarantee what you get back is busy. I'm busy, mate. Flat out like a lizard drinking, you know, whatever it is. There's something that talks about, look at how busy I am. Because if I'm not busy, well, then my boss is going to come and take my job away from me, you know? Um, and to me, that glorification of busy has become a massive problem for middle management. They often see senior managers, you know, who are people who have been hugely successful in life, and often success comes from hard work and a lot of it. So they see people above them that are, you know, putting in big hours and busy all the time and that sort of stuff, and they see that as something to look up to, you know.
Yeah.
But the most successful senior managers I've seen, the most successful middle managers I've seen, are people who are really good at managing their time. Yeah.
Yeah.
You know, it reminds you were asking about where are we going to get the time to do this investment for. You know, it reminds me of that old story, which I'm sure is not true at all, but it illustrates a point. The conversation between the CFO and the CEO, you know, and the CFO says, well, what if we spend all this money on training and they leave? And the CEO goes, yeah, but what if we don't and they stay? You know. um,
Oh,
and I'm sure it's not true, but it illustrates the point pretty well. You know, if they don't have the time for us, and I'm talking a small investment, I'm talking a day every couple of months over, you know, 5 or 6 sessions to do that emerging leader program. I'm talking about an hour every fortnight for a coaching session. You know, it's not,
yeah.
we're not talking a massive time investment here. But if they don't have that time, you got to make it for them. You know, this
Yep.
is what I was talking to you about earlier when I mentioned that organization where the senior leaders saw it as their job to get the roadblocks out of the middle manager's way. Busyness was seen as a roadblock there as well. There's too much shit on your project list. Kill some of it off, you know. Um, uh, they were comfortable making hard priority choices,
So,
and we've got to do that.
so if we talk about, we've got to focus the role down of what do you actually expect to be, because the more context switching they end up doing between strategy, technical people, admin, right, the less productive they're going to be. You got to kill some of that bureaucracy that's happening at that point, or the administration, to free them up. You need to invest your time. But the other one is about the empowerment, the freedom to give it a crack, right? The
Yes.
sincere freedom to give it a crack. Have you seen examples where they've generally like, what's the best way? Or if I'm an anxious exec and I'm like, okay, how do, just saying, what's the best way to set up your middle management in a way that gives them a genuine freedom to give it a crack?
I think I can tell you a little story that illustrates this point.
Mm,
I was a learning and development manager. The HR director from the organization had just left, and we hadn't replaced them yet. So I ended up reporting direct to the CEO for the first time in my life.
yep.
And the CEO, because there was no people and culture director there, basically said, "Here's your training budget for the year." And I was like, "Uh oh, never had to deal with one of those before either." So I got a bit freaked out. You know, I was reasonably young at the time, and I was like, okay, I've spent 10,000 on this piece of training that I need. I better go and tell the CEO. And I'd go to him and go, hey, just so you know, I spent 10 grand on this. And I'd go back to him the following day and go, hey, just so you know, I spent another 5 grand on this, you know. And he just looked at me and he was like, Rob, sit down. And I was like, what? He goes, right. I gave you $300,000 to spend.
Yeah.
If by the end of the year you've spent it and my people are trained, we're good. If by the end of the year you've spent it and my people aren't trained, we'll work out how to do it better next year. If by the end of the year you've spent 300 grand and you've got a new Porsche, we've got a problem.
Yeah.
And he like that's all he said to me. But it left me in a position where I went, okay, I have permission to fail here, you know? Um, and despite the fact that it's 300 grand and it's a big deal, you know, he's still going to be okay if we don't get it quite right. I had enough experience to get it right enough, you know. And of course, at the end of the year, we had the conversation, and he was like, "Yeah, you spent the budget well, and it worked fine." But all he was doing was giving me permission to fail. The I think one of the things that we need to allow middle managers to do, but also get middle managers to do with their teams, is to reconceptualize the idea of failure. One of the things that I talk to people about a lot is learning to drive a manual car. Now I realize I'm showing my age in that regard. It's practically impossible to buy a manual car these days. I had somebody refer to a stick shift in one of my training sessions as a millennial anti-theft device, which I thought was kind of funny. But the point is, most people can remember when they learn to drive a manual car for the first time. It usually doesn't go smoothly, but you can still drive a car, right?
Yeah.
And what we can look at is that psychologists say that every time you learn something new, you go through 4 stages. You start off unconsciously incompetent. You get into the car. If your experience is anything like mine, your dad was sitting next to you and you're thinking to yourself, I've been watching this clown do it for 15 years and I'm a teenager and I know everything. So how hard can this be? Anytime you hear somebody say, how hard can this be? They're unconsciously incompetent. Yeah.
Yeah.
But then you stall the car or you bunny hop it down the road or whatever. You screw it up and you very quickly move on to stage 2. Now I'm consciously incompetent. Now I know that this is harder than I thought, Then after a bit of practice in parking lots or whatever, so you don't kill somebody, you move on to stage 3, where I'm now consciously competent. I can do this, but I have to give it my full attention. If I get distracted, I'm going to grind a gear or stall the car again or something like that. And eventually, after lots of practice, you move on to stage 4, where now I can do this, and it's as I'm unconsciously competent. I can do it. I don't have to think about it. It's as easy as walking or talking or running up credit card debt. It's just something I can do. So for me, what's really important is that every time you learn something new, you go through those 4 stages. It might take 20 seconds. It might take 20 years, but you're going through those 4 stages. Yeah. So when I think when you know that, what you realize is that the only way that human beings learn is by failing, by screwing something up. Sure, you can learn from somebody else's failures, but it'll never be as good a lesson as the failures that you make yourself. So we have to reconceptualize our relationship with failure. We have to make it okay for middle managers to screw up, and we have to get them to pass that on to their teams, that it's okay for them to screw up. Once, so you can learn from it and then do it better next time around.
And I think that's perfect because as a bombshell to end on there, Rob, because this is our very first podcast. It's a hell of a potential screw up that we've done at this point. God knows what's going to happen when we get to the editing stage from it. I've absolutely had a thrill. How have you found this?
I've had a blast. I love talking about this stuff. I am genuinely curious about people. It gets me out of bed in the morning. So yeah, I love it.
For the listeners that's come in today, please follow us, share us, leave a review. You can find us on Apple, YouTube. We'll throw a link even on LinkedIn as well, and Substack. Next episode, like for the very next topic we're going to talk on next week, we're going to dive into the fun topic of let's return to work. And we're going to try and look at it both sides of the story because that's just a nice, sensitive topic to play on. Thanks, Rob, for coming on. Look forward to seeing you next week.
You're more than welcome, Matt. I'll look forward to it too. Thank you.
Thanks.